Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, in this video, I want to talk about something that I think is very, very important with NPD and with NPD recovery, and also with NPD self-awareness, which is the very important issue of self-esteem. This is a very controversial issue because I think I have some controversial opinions about it. I'm not really a big believer in self-esteem. I think self-esteem is almost entirely fantasy oriented. Okay, so I think the true well-being is not any kind of self-esteem. In other words, I think the idea of good self-esteem or healthy self-esteem, what we're really saying is healthy fantasy. And I think it's probably healthier and probably more in line with a recovery, not to really think about self-esteem at all, and to regard most self-esteem as really fantasy material. Okay, and just to kind of get beyond any kind of self-esteem. Okay, but I still want to talk about it because while someone is in NPD, obviously self-esteem is a major issue. Okay, and I see self-esteem as particularly connected to envy. In other words, I think envy and self-esteem are really just kind of the same thing. Okay, and so basically, at the root of all this, I think is a real. I almost want to say a trauma. I'm going to explain why I don't think it's a trauma, but it's as close as you get in NPD to a real trauma of the personality. Okay, because I think envy and self-esteem all have to do with our confrontation. Okay, with that terrible thing that all humans have to deal with, which is the idea of being out of your league or confronting things that are out of your league. Okay, so basically, here's the bad news, or here's the good news. Every human being will have to deal with at some point the idea of being outclassed, or things being out of your league, or you're not being in the at the level of other people. And I know it sounds cruel, and I know that well-meaning people and healthy people will deny that that's important, but the fact is actually it's very important. Okay, and it's really a big part of the human economy and the human, I guess you call it the political social economy. Okay, there very much are social classes, and within social classes, there are classes that have to do, levels that have to do with attractiveness and with competency, and with, just intangibles, intangibles actually, and, different people have different ways of dealing with this. Almost everybody has some level of, I guess, inauthenticity in the way we deal with this. And so there's a little bit of, I think, you might say low grade narcissism, subclinical narcissism all over the culture. Okay. Obviously, when we talk about having a diagnosable NPD, we're talking about people who fall at the far extreme in how we deal with these things. Okay. But, any human being, especially people on the spectrum, almost every human being will have to deal with the real, almost cruel fact that there is sort of a pecking order. There is sort of like different class systems, and the real, I guess, the drama of confronting being out of your league, and this really shows up with people who are interested, let's say, in dating other people, or the sexual economy, the world of romantic relationships or dating and all that. And also, in careers, how we choose our professions, and also how we choose to kind of think of ourselves, so this is very serious. And if it's handled properly, it's actually really a step it's a step in our path towards maturity. Okay, because everybody has to deal with this. I mean, everybody deals with this. And I think it's really, instead of seeing it as like a trauma, even if the news is bad for us, because sometimes we really find where we fall short, compared to other people. And instead of that being a tragedy, which it really is not a tragedy at all, but instead of that feeling like a tragedy, it can actually turn out to be one of the things that makes us the most mature, and that really richens the soul. So whenever we deal with something that appears to us like almost like a phobia, or something like, oh my God, I don't want to touch that, sometimes when we really get in there and let it cook, and we just put it into the pot and let it cook, and that's where the dialectics comes in. I've been talking about organic dialectic. Basically, the idea of organic dialectic, if I could put it into simple words, is just having uncomfortable ideas and uncomfortable realities just kind of sit and stew in us without orchestration, without trying to manage how we think about it, without trying to manage an opinion to make it feel less uncomfortable, just letting things be uncomfortable okay, and letting that kind of stew and metabolize without orchestration. Okay, that to me is organic dialectic. Okay, and obviously, obviously people with NPD, people with cluster B, we really have issues and really have deficiencies in our dialectical processing. Okay. But, where that really comes in and where that really shows up, I think it's almost analogous to people who have a violent, severe intolerance of foods they don't like. Okay. Like, say, there are people who are just violently disgusted by onions or broccoli, or you know what I mean, or spinach, or like some people don't like the texture of fish that's not cooked a certain way, or fish that has bones in it, or fish that tastes like fish, or whatever. But some people can just eat it. Other people are like, it makes them gag, it makes them throw up. So I think that's actually a good analogy to what happens with cluster B, that there are some issues that are so moving and so deep and touch us so deeply that it's almost like unthinkable to really just confront those things. And it's kind of like really kind of the same as when someone hates the taste of onions. Oh my God, I can't even smell that onion, but you're putting it on my plate, I have to eat that. It's like, you're going to make me vomit. It's like untouchable, unapproachable subject matter. You know what I mean? And that's where that's where we actually run into the limits of our dialectical processing. Um, and obviously, if we're going to look at, sort of sort of like redeveloping ourselves, going back, like, say, to the stage of adolescence. I think adolescence is actually a really important period, and sort of kind of redeveloping ourselves through those things that we did not develop. Okay, and dealing with things that we did not deal with, because whatever we don't deal with, we're hung up at that stage. Okay, so if I have, like, say, these weird hangups around envy, or around things that are out of my league, I might be kind of hung up at like age 12 or age 13, 14, something like that. And so, if these things are really like untouchables, unapproachables, they're like unapproachable things. Obviously, it's not like we can't go and approach it, but we have to have some kind of coaching or some kind of like training, and we really have to make a point of, sort of conquering these little areas that have sort of hung us up and sort of kept us from developing. And I think it's very serious, actually, looking back in my past. It's very serious when you start to depart from let's say your peer group, because as soon as you start having like special hangups that sort of keep you from identifying with your peer group, in a sense, your peer group is going to continue developing, and they're sort of going to let you go, because you have to, how would you say, when you show signs that you're sort of hung up on things that the peer group is actually progressing through, okay, especially when it comes to dialectical maturity, you're going to be sort of identified as somebody who has an asterisk. Okay, and at some point you're kind of going to branch off, and you're not going to be developing with your peer group. Okay, and that will really hurt you. I think it hurt me, and it really hurts you in your development as you become an adult, because you really are kind of like departed, separate, and sort of banished from, sort of like the healthy society, so to speak. And that's happened to me. Like, I'm a banished person. I always thought that I could identify with the mythology about Satan. How Satan is sort of like banished from the heavenly kingdom, whatever. And I think on some poetic level, I think we have that satanic experience. Which is that we get banished, because something hangs up in our development, and it's sort of like forever and ever. Sorry about those dogs; those are neighbors' dogs, but we sort of get, sorry, it's terrible. Anyway, we sort of get banished by, let's say, crucial moments where we sort of aren't able to process certain important things, and we sort of get these hangups that sort of break us off the train. And then the rest of society, the rest of our peers, kind of move on in their development, and we're sort of hung up in these sort of like just hangups. And in a way, we sort of get slowly peeled off from association with our peer group and our generation. And that is, it's not the end of the world. I mean, I think the fact that I've had some satanic experience, I mean, I say satanic, I mean, the idea of being fallen from grace, I think, understand it poetically. I mean, it's not, don't be afraid of it. It's not like, it doesn't mean more than that, but I think it's a useful poetic metaphor. And yeah, so I mean, I've had that, and I mean, in a sense, you can never recover it. I mean, if I broke off, like, say, at age 13, 14, from, let's say, being identified properly and being in understanding and development with my peer group and my generation. Okay, if I got peeled off from that, in a sense, I can never really recover. Because if I'm able to recover artificially now, okay, that's not, I'm never going to recover all those years, and I'm never really going to go through all the decades of development that I could have, So in a sense, you can't really fix it. You can't really undo what's happened, but you can at least try to make life ongoing at least a little better, and you could try and at least sort of deal with those hangups. And so you're not going to recover all the lost time, but you can sort of get over it. Okay, so I want to talk about how, in my case, how I've experienced the envy and the self-esteem. Okay, and I think envy and self-esteem are really kind of the same thing. Okay, so at least in my experience. Okay, so now this is the closest to anything that I would call a trauma. Okay, now I don't want to call it a trauma because, I mean, to me, trauma should be a concussion. Okay, a concussion that leaves you permanently brain damaged. Okay, now, if somebody has a head injury, okay, and they permanently have the inability to do something with their brain, okay, that's trauma, okay, because there's nothing you can do about it. Like say you have a stroke, or you have some kind of head injury, and then forever and ever, I can't do things with let's say my arms or my legs, or I lose certain emotional process because it's gone. My brain has been damaged. Okay, if we're not brain damaged, okay, do we really want to call that trauma, or do we want to call that, let's say, a barrier? It's a barrier. Okay, it's like a neurotic barrier. It's like people that have phobias. There are some people who are so terrified to get on an airplane. Okay, or there's people who are terrified. They have a phobia of eating oysters or seeing a spider. There's people who have phobias of snakes. These are serious things. Okay, but to say that that's on the level of having a brain injury, okay, the fact is, yeah, if I'm afraid of spiders, or if I'm afraid of eating like certain disgusting foods or whatever, the bottom line is, I should not think of it as the same as having, like, say, a brain injury. Okay, I mean, it may be a major, major trauma for me. Okay, and I may have a phobia. Okay, but I have to believe that, at least, thank God, I don't have a brain injury in that area. And so maybe it's very, very difficult for me to approach that. But I should never say it's impossible, because that would be falsely to say that I have the equivalent of a brain injury, when I really don't. Okay, it seems like a trauma. Okay, it seems like a brain injury. It seems like a complete limit. But what probably is true is that it's just very, very, very uncomfortable. And we have a very, very strong kind of a barrier reaction. Okay. And that if we're going to approach it, we have to approach it with coaching, with training, and with small, small increments. And we have to really make a point of sort of evolving ourselves, through a program, and that it's not going to be casual. It'll be very difficult. But don't take something that's very difficult and say it's impossible. Okay, because that what we're doing, if we do that, if we say it's impossible, then we're reinforcing actually some of the bullshit that's actually in our head. And you don't want to reinforce, condemnations that we put on ourselves, when in fact they're not necessarily true. Okay. Yes. Okay. I have some barriers. I have some, some almost unreachables, untouchable areas. But I prefer to say that, yeah, they're very difficult for me and they're very challenging, but I'm not going to say they're impossible. Okay, so let's get into that, as far as, like, say, the self-esteem and the envy and all that. Okay, so basically, in my case, the envy and the self-esteem all show up for me in places where I was not able to go through, like, say, the stages of grief, the stages of acceptance, okay, of very uncomfortable things for me. Okay. Now, what was very uncomfortable for me? Okay. Growing up, what was my broccoli? What was my onion? What was my fish tasting fish? Okay. The thing for me that got me, like, traumatized, okay, was seeing things out of my league, like really out of my league. Okay. It crushed me, and it left me frozen. Like, I could not develop out of that. It was like I'm stuck. I was hung up. Okay. Because it was just too uncomfortable. Okay. It was just too uncomfortable. Okay. So how did that show up for me? Okay. Around the time of like 12 and 13 years old, when everybody's going through puberty, okay, I did not go through puberty. Okay. I just didn't. I was just delayed puberty. And I was a year older than my classmates. That was a terrible part. I come from a family where, I guess, genetically, we go through puberty like 2 years later. And then, actually, it's funny because I have a younger brother and I guess he didn't get that genetic. And so he's 2 years younger and he's going through puberty and I'm not. Okay. And it was terrible. And my brother's attractive. My brother's like, he's like a buff, like a macho dude. And, he's so attractive to girls. And I'm just like this nerdy, skinny guy who's not even going through puberty. Okay. So that's a crushing feeling when at age 12 and 13, age 13, 14, the most important thing, almost one of the most important thing is attractiveness and how you're developing. Okay. And I was just like at the bottom of the barrel. Okay. And it was really hard to deal with. It was embarrassing. And it was sort of like crushing because to make it worse, I was attracted to girls that were developing. Okay. And I could never really deal with the fact that these people were in some sense out of my league, like truly objectively out of my league. Okay. And also like say like in terms of other guys, like if I had friends, slowly and slowly my friends were kind of like developing and developing, and I was like this little kid, and so I was like kind of like a pain in the ass for these people because they kind of wanted to move on and grow up, and I'm just like this tag along little doggy, little puppy, and it was just uncomfortable, and really, I mean, you pay a price for that, um, but for whatever reason, I was so enamored, and I was so mesmerized by how attractive, both the boys and girls were. I mean, it was like, the girls, it was like almost like sexual attraction, and then with the guys, it was like you want to be part of the cool dudes, and you want to hang out, and you want to be accepted. And basically I wasn't getting, and I shouldn't have. I mean, I had to understand. I guess a wise person could have told me, you're gonna pay a price for this, but just be patient. Later on in life, you might catch up, whatever. But the bottom line, it was crushing to me because I felt like it was beyond my control, and basically, I just felt like it was just too horrible to accept. Okay, now let's just admit it. When things can happen in life, like people get cancer, people get heart disease, people get diabetes, and there are a lot of things that can happen where it's going to be hard to accept what's happening. Okay. Or like say somebody dies or somebody's going to die, and they say you go through the stages of grief, denial, whatever, bargaining, whatever, but you don't get to acceptance. You know what I mean? And basically, the subject matter for me was so uncomfortable that I could not really accept it. I could accept it intellectually, but I couldn't let myself feel it and just accept the terrible feeling of it because I have that thing with cluster B where very uncomfortable subject matter, I don't like to let it just sit on me because I don't tolerate it. That's kind of like to me the broccoli, that's like the onion, it makes me sick. It's like disgusting. So I never let myself just sit and just accept. Okay. Um because here's the magic. Okay, if you can accept something as terrible as, like, say, not going through puberty and not being sort of like in your peer group, being sort of like Satan, being fallen from grace, and really just not being part of, you know the world of people, like say the people of your generation. Once you have one of those falls from grace, if you actually can accept it, okay, as soon as you truly accept it, then you start your path where now you're just on the path to whatever you can do. You know what I mean? And so you're like open a new door, and then you start living into that new reality. Okay. But see, if you cannot accept it, then you're just frozen and you don't have any development. You see what I'm saying? So it's almost like when you can accept something, okay, however terrible it is, then the moment you accept it, now you've started living a new life. And in that new life, with that acceptance, the sky's the limit. You're going to live in that new condition, but you're going to develop, and you're not going to be hung up, and you're just going to go and move ahead and progress. But if you're sort of hung up and you don't really get to acceptance, it sort of has a way of like freezing you at that stage, and you're not really developing. Okay. So I guess, I can't really blame myself too much because I wasn't creative enough as a young person to see all that philosophy. Okay. I wasn't creative enough. I probably did need a special kind of father figure, or an uncle or a cousin, or maybe like a mentor to kind of explain how important it is to accept terrible things. And then if I could have just had that, like just a little bit of a tip, a little bit of a hint, I think I would have understood. Okay. And I think I could have been coached at that time, but I didn't have that. Okay. And the people around me who meant well, and they could see that I was struggling, they wanted to give good advice, but they didn't give me dead center advice on acceptance. Okay. I think what my father did is he said, hey, don't underestimate yourself. You might be more good looking than you think, like that's just bullshit. That didn't really apply to the situation I was in. And in fact, I needed something more like just accept it, you know? And I guess my dad, he wouldn't know how to give that advice because he has a different way of, he has a different experience, So basically for me, everything about self-esteem at that point, like before that, I didn't even think about self-esteem because I was like, before puberty, I was actually, above average compared to my peers. And I didn't have to have self-esteem. I didn't even have to think about it. I was already okay. I was well adjusted. But after puberty, or during and after puberty, it was such an issue that then self-esteem came into the picture, you see, because I'm hung up, okay, on my status. You know what I mean? I'm hung up, and suddenly self-esteem is born. Like, what is my status? And then you start imagining, and you get into your head, and you go into fantasy. Trust me, when you are well adapted, when you are actually doing good, okay, there is no self-esteem. You're just well adjusted. You see what I mean? So as soon as you get into self-esteem, you're already getting into kind of a fantasy around the crushing, difficult, the uncomfort, the discomfort of seeing yourself maybe out of your league, out of your league, out of your league. And in my opinion, if you even have a doubt about being out of your league, you're out of your league. Okay. Because when you're in the league and you're with people and you're on their level, you don't have a doubt. Okay. I'm sorry. I mean, that's the bad news. But it's also the good news, because then you can accept it and then you can move on from there. Okay. Now, some people might say, hey, but what about the people who they just have like a neurosis where they're beautiful, they're talented, but they think they're not. Okay. Well, hey, I'm sorry. If you have that, that takes you out of the league. I'm sorry. If you have anything psychological that has you like not knowing your actual status, or, distorting reality, you're not in the league. Okay. Because you're just not, so anybody who's dealing with, let's say, whether it's imagined or real, whether it's objective or not objective, if you're not really comfortably just well adjusted with other people, well, you're going to have to accept it, you know, and don't play bullshit with yourself and say, oh yeah, I really am well adjusted, but I'm just playing mind games. No, you're not good. If you even imagine yourself to be ugly and you're not ugly, that's a problem, you know and you're not well adjusted, and you have to go through the grief steps, and you have to accept that. And the good news is that once you accept it, then your life begins again, you know and acceptance doesn't mean, for example, like if you're a beautiful, talented person and you think, well, just so I don't feel like my inferiority complex, I'm gonna find the ugliest person to be dating, and well, that's not dealing with it. Dealing with it is really dealing with it, the pain, saying like, yeah, I'm a beautiful person, I'm talented, but I think I'm disgusting and blah, blah, blah. It's like, don't just go dating ugly people and getting into destructive situations. That's not dealing with it. It's better just to feel like shit and to say, I have this problem, because then once you really face it and you really emotionally deal with it, then you can actually start living the real life. Okay. And when you live the real life, then you're readapted. You're just readapted according to your conditions, you know? Um, so basically, if I had properly dealt with, let's say, not going through puberty, okay, if I had properly just suffered it and just felt it with no solution, but just accepted it, okay, I would have started just losing hope in a healthy way. Like, I'm never going to date a gorgeous, even if I could potentially, it's better just to not assume, just say, hey, look, I'm not in that league. I have to find my own league, and I don't mean like being, be careful, because I don't mean like playing that self-destructive thing where I find the ugliest people. It's more like just find my league, okay, without trying to imagine, just like be myself. And then, you'll know it when you see it, okay? Because when you are around people that are in your league, okay, when you're around people that are your level, you're not going to feel anything positive or negative. It's just like, it's like you don't taste it. It's like the water that has no taste. So here's where we get into the envy, and here's where we get into the problems. Okay. Um, if you really use your wisdom, and if you use your heart, and you use your instinct and your intuition, okay, you know there's a difference when you're attracted to something that's out of your league versus when you're dealing with things that are in your league. Okay. So a lot of times this happens with men a lot. Okay. And I think with women too. They talk about people, oh, that person's hot. That person's hot, super attractive, or that person is really charismatic or whatever. you know, Whenever that starts to sizzle a little too much, and whenever the frying pan starts to really get sizzling, okay, you're probably dealing something with out of your league. Okay, let's just be honest about that. Okay, because when you're around people that are just totally in your league, it doesn't sizzle. Okay, it just doesn't sizzle. Okay, and for a lot of people, like say if you were always like in the big leagues, like really with the hot people, like truly, it's not going to really sizzle for you because you're in that league. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of a sad thing, but like we have to understand that people that get like say like me, like for a while I was kind of addicted to the sizzle. Okay, the things that sizzle. All right, but if I'm honest, okay, I started getting adapted to the allure, the salivation, the it's like the stimulus of having, like, say, savoring the idea of partaking and intermingling with things that were out of my league. Okay, all right, and so I got sort of addicted to the sizzle, and I sort of programmed myself to think that that's a standard for me to be happy. And you see it a lot with the drug addiction too. When you get into a super normal experience with a drug, like a drug, how you feel on drugs, you're kind of going out of your league. You know what I'm saying? So you're like avoiding your own league, which is just plain vanilla, kind of, colorless, tasteless. It's not Kool-Aid, it's not Coca-Cola, it's just water. You know what I mean? That's, it seems so tough, it seems so cruel, but if you really want to be healthy, you got to get away from all this out of your league stuff, you know. And when you're in your league, there is no self-esteem. It's just it's just plain vanilla. It's not even vanilla. It's just water. It's just water and breathing air. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to say, I know people want to say, oh, but if you have really NPD, it would be almost impossible. You're such a barrier. It's like, yeah, okay, fine. It's very difficult. All right. And I know it's the last thing that people want. Oh, you want me just to drink water? You don't want me to have any more sizzle in my life. You want to take the spice out of life. It's like, fuck you. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm just saying my experience. Okay. And I think there's a lot to be said for getting in your league, and not going below your league either, just your league, just where you can't even taste it. It's colorless and tasteless. And I think in our hearts, we know what that is. Okay. And we don't be stupid about it. Like again, if you have issues and you think the way to deal with it is to hang out with the worst people so that you don't feel bad, that's bullshit. Okay. I'm talking about just the water, the tasteless, sort of plain water of just being with things that are just in your league. Okay. And when you deal with and live in your league and you live the best you can in your league, okay, you will grow a big tree. You'll grow a big oak tree. Okay. And in the end, it's worth it. Okay. And you will have a fantastic life. You'll have a great life. Okay. But you have to give yourself into that, and make the most of it. Okay. And so, it's not like you're just like cutting out all the sizzle and all the razzle dazzle, like just to suffer. No, it's because it will in the end produce the big oak tree. Okay. Whereas if you try to live in the sizzle, it's kind of like your seeds might sprout, but you'll never grow a tree. You won't grow any tree, and you'll just be a nothing. You know what I mean? So it's like, like in the Gospels, they talk about planting the seed in the proper soil, and you got to find the soil that is truly you, and don't go for the sizzle. You know what I mean? And I guarantee at that point, you're not going to have any self-esteem. You don't have to have self-esteem. When you're adapted, there is no self-esteem, So if I had an issue with self-esteem, I would just forget the topic. Like, don't try to improve it. It's like, just forget about it. Just go into your league, wherever it is, truly, and just your seed will sprout, and you will become a big tree. And that would be, you can't even imagine how good that could be. So sorry about those dogs next door, but anyway, in my opinion, self-esteem is just bullshit. Okay. When you're in your league, you won't have self-esteem. Okay. So thanks for watching, and sorry about those dogs. Talk to you later.